Today, the countdown to this weekend's presidential election will take in a look at economic planning, budgeting, resource management, and whether change and continuity are mutually inclusive or mutually exclusive. The man who's joining us now is Ben Akabo, is the Honorable Commissioner for Economic Planning and Budget for Lagos State. He is a professional banker, economist, and an accountant, as well as an alumni of the Lagos Business School. Mr. Akabo, thank you very much for coming through to us this morning, despite the heavy vehicular traffic.
Thank you, Wilson. My pleasure.
Okay. Let's get started from the very top. What type of economic planning and budgetary reforms do you think Nigeria requires for a turnaround?
Well, as as a minimum, we need to, change fundamentally the structure of our budget in terms of how much goes to capital expenditure and how much goes to recurrent expenditure. And even within recurrent expenditure, in Lagos State we have a concept that we call good recurrent and bad recurrent expenditure. And good recurrent includes expenditure on maintenance of public infrastructure, even though it's classified as recurrent. So it's not just the split between recurrent and capital. That is the minimum reform that we need to see. If we are still running budgets where we're spending 80% on recurrent and 20% on capital, we will not achieve our aspirations for development as a country.
Your job and the job of the economic managers and the political managers for the economy is to manage resources, isn't it? Put these resources together and allocate them to the various areas. So why do you think Nigeria's resource management process should be in a way that would develop a people-based economic growth?
Well, first of all, I think that everyone must understand that the total revenues accruing to us, even as a nation, are not adequate to meet our needs. As a country, 170 million people, with the sort of developmental aspirations we have, with our huge infrastructure deficits, we should be running a significantly larger budget than we currently are. And therefore, the real challenge, oftentimes there's a lot of focus on managing the available resources. But we need to focus even more keenly on generating additional resources. Even with the best management, what we have is inadequate. So in addition to managing that better, there must be a focus on growing the resource base of the nation.
In what specific areas do you think we need to grow our resource base outside an expanded tax dragnet?
Well, again, first of all, yes, taxation has got to be it. We have one of the lowest, tax to GDP ratios on the continent, and indeed, in the world, and that's been exacerbated by the recent rebasing of our GDP. So yes, Nigerians have got to, and for too long, governments have lied to Nigerians that it's okay not to pay taxes and whatever. But again, it's not as easy as this thing. I can tell you that from our experience in Lagos State. The people have become accustomed for too long not paying taxes. If you look at at the federal level, for instance, apart from the major corporations, it's a large number of companies that don't even file annual returns, talk less of paying taxes. But you see, as long as people, including businesses, have to provide for themselves a lot of the infrastructure that they require to run their businesses, they feel justified not to pay the taxes. So it's two ways. If government thinks you can simply just charge the people without anything changing in terms of the support, that they get, if they're still going to provide their own water, provide their own power, provide their own roads, provide their own security, and all of that, it reduces, it diminishes your moral, right to earn taxes. Nevertheless, taxes are a matter of law. And so, regardless of whether those things happen, people have to, pay their taxes. But as they begin to pay, government has to be prepared for the fact that people are going to then more forcefully demand, services from government. So as we prepare to ramp up the tax collection machinery, we must be prepared to ramp up service delivery.
Now, if you look at the country historically, do you think we are in a position to ask the people to pay more taxes, expand the dragnet, as it were, at a time, as you have put it, when most of the social infrastructure at one of the lowest level, the Human Development Index is also at one of the lowest levels, as it were? What do you think should change? And that brings the key question. Do you think, based on where we are, that continuity and change are mutually inclusive or mutually exclusive?
Well, the truth is, there are things that certainly must change, and there's a lot that needs to change in the way that we have, governed ourselves, and in particular the way we've run the economy. But there are, of course, also some, things that need to continue. So they're not mutually exclusive. There are things that, the things that are working, clearly there's a case for continuity. There's an overwhelming case for change because there's more that is not working than that which is working.
So let's from an economic planner, public administrator, and a budget person perspective, and someone who came from the private sector where budgeting and planning is part of your daily exercise over the years before you got into the administration of Lagos State as the commissioner in charge of that. Where do you think this change needs to happen very quickly post March 28, May 29, a handover to a new administration?
Well, when I took over responsibility for that ministry in Lagos State, in my very first year, I came up with I said we were going to operate the concept of a zero-based budget. And that meant that every line in the budget had to be justified afresh. And I tried to explain this simplistically to everyone. So just assume that you have zero on this line. It doesn't matter how long that line has existed in the budget from the creation of the state. You must justify it afresh. First, the existence of that line in the budget and how much gets a lot of, what in the public sector across the country, a lot of what happens is simply incremental budgeting. There isn't a rigor, there isn't sufficient rigor in the budgeting process. And so the line has always been there. Okay, last year we had, 1 million in it. Okay, let's just put 1.2. Just
carry forward.
Just